Good morning, children. I hope you have seen the previous video of Harappan civilization, our constitutions, and fundamental right. I hope so people have understood, right? And in this video, I'm going to start with the next chapter, that is the early Vedic civilization. And the name itself suggests that we are going to read about Vedas in this civilization, though we have not found the writings in Harappan civilization because it has not been deciphered so far. If you remember, the writing of Harappans still has not been deciphered by the evacuators or historians. Clear? But in early Vedic civilization, you got to know about the Vedas, and Vedas, they were telling us the sources. Ki how come which Vedas has been originated? How come the early Aryans migrated? What were their features, their characteristics? Lot many things you will come to know with the help of Vedas literature, right, everyone? So we're going to read in depth about everything in early Vedic civilization. And before starting, clear in your mind ki this is not an all-rounded civilization. All-round development wasn't there in this civilization, right? This civilization was totally dependent on agriculture, and these were all early Aryans. Early Aryans means they were started migrating from Central Asia to India, right? To central. In fact, they were migrating. They started migrating from Central Asia, different parts of India and Europe. Clear? So this also we will discuss later on. So if you see that early Vedic civilization, so you will see the initial phase of the Aryans. They were the main inhabitants of this civilization, and how come they have developed themselves, what happened, everything we are going to discuss in this chapter. So let's start with early Vedic civilization. Now, before starting, we just clear ourselves with the settlement. Ki how come Aryans settled their bases, right? Where they have settled in India. Obviously, they come from northwestern part of India. Everyone knows. And northwestern part of civilization, if you see northwestern part, this part belonged to Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. If you see Harappan and Mohenjo-daro, the two centers of this civilization was all scattered and spreaded almost in this whole part. That means northwestern part of India. Clear? So if you see, Aryans also has settled in northwestern part of India. Clear? Now see where they have simply spreaded their settlement, where they established themselves. Let's start now. Now most historians held their views that the early Aryans migrated from Caspian Sea region, Central Asia, different parts of Asia and Europe. They had the views, but still it was still a mystery from they have been migrated. But if you remember, the most important thing was what? They started. We have got the traces. They started coming from Central Asia, right? That means Caspian Sea region to different parts of Asia and Europe. Okay? Now in India, now where they settled in India, this also we want to know where they settled in India. So in India, Aryans lived in Sapta Sindhu region. Sapta, seven. There's a Sanskrit term, right? Sapta means seven. So they simply, the nearby Sapta Sindhu regions, they have the settlement in India. It was comprised of 5 rivers. They have settled nearby the 5 rivers, right? Punjab, Jhelum, earlier it was used to be called Jhelum, right? Then Vitasta, then Chenab, Askani, then Ravi, then Parusini, Bias, Vipas, Satluj, Satadru, and river Indus, Sindhu, and river Saraswati. So if you see the rivers and their old names, right? So all these, they have simply settled their civilization nearby these rivers. Clear? Now next, this region believed to be the first permanent home of the Aryans. So historians have the views that these regions, if you see like Punjab, Chenab, Ravi, Bias, Satluj, Indus, Saraswati. These regions were solely the settlement of the early Aryans. I'm talking about early Aryans, not the later Vedic Aryans, right? Where simply they started coming to India and they started, establishing their bases in India, right? Now next, the hymns of Rig Veda were composed, and here in this civilization you will get to know about the Rig Veda, one of the oldest Veda in the Vedic civilization, right? And from that Veda you come to know different sources. Clear? Let's come to the next slide now. Now, sources to reconstruct the early Vedic civilization. Now, how was it proved that early Vedic civilization has been existed so far? Right, the source was obviously we got Rig Veda. Now, Rig Veda was what, and what source it tell us? Let's see now. Now, the Vedic literature of the Aryans divided into two categories: early and later Vedic literature. Now, here in this I'm going to discuss about early literature, and later Vedic literature I will be discussing in the next chapter. Where this chapter is being categorized into two parts: early Vedic and later Vedic age. Right. Next, now the Rig Veda, the first of the Vedas, probably the earliest literary work that humanity possesses. Now the oldest Veda which we have got was Rig Veda. Now it contained, now what was Rig Veda? Everyone wants to ask what was Rig Veda. Basically it contained hymns, right, in praise of goddesses like Indra, Varuna and Agni, because they were the nature worshipper. So basically in this Veda they simply explained about what the hymns in praise of gods and goddesses, right? Now these, what happened now, it consisted of 1028 hymns divided into 10 mandalas or books. Clear? Now 1028, and they are divided into 1028, 1028 hymns, right? And they were divided into 10 mandalas or books. Now it pertains to the period from now, the period, now because period obviously it's very important in every civilization. This period is from 1500 BC to 1000 BC, right? So in between this period, we have the early Vedic civilization. Clear? And they were simply, again I revise, they simply established themselves nearby Sapta Sindhu regions. Let's move on to another slide now. Now, Rig Vedic hymns, right? The Rig Vedic hymns we have read, they were in praise of gods and goddesses. So, what they simply told, what they mentioned, where we come to realize that yes, early Vedic civilization has been existed. So, they mentioned now, see now, what they mentioned in the Rig Veda, the god Indra is also called Purandar, which means the breaker of forts. The Aryan often invoked to destroy their enemies, right? So, this Veda talked about what the god Indra, right? And basically they worship god Indra. Why? Because they wanted to destroy their enemies. Next, Agni was a personification of the sacrificial fire. Now they have to sacrifice also, to sacrifice sort of Havan, right? And where they worshipped fire. Clear? Fire, and the goddesses of fire was Agni, right? And what is signified? Signifies sacrifice or yajnas occupied a prominent place. Agni was thought of a messenger or bearer of offerings of milk, grain, ghee, etc. from men to gods, where men used to offer what? The milk, ghee, and grain in the Agni, right? So that they can please the gods. Next, now many references of the cows and bulls. Obviously you hear in this Veda they referred about the cows and the bulls, right? And what happened, it constituted the most important form of wealth. That means those who had cows and bulls, they were considered as the wealthiest persons of the town. Clear? So this was all we come to know through Rig Veda. Clear? Next, Rig Vedic hymns. Now, one hymn in the Rig Veda refer to the four order of society, and another thing which Rig Veda explain us about the four orders of society. As everyone knows, the very first order, the upper order, comprised of priests or Brahmins, the warriors. Next to the Brahmins, we have Kshatriyas. Then next to the Kshatriyas, we have common people engaged in agriculture, trade, and industry, known as Vaishyas, and servants and workers, known as Shudras. This differentiation was based on occupation. That whosoever had the occupation, they were considered as they had the different categories based on occupation. So those who are priests, they were considered as Brahmins. Clear? Then those who were warriors, they were considered as Kshatriyas. Then common people, they were engaged in agriculture, trade, industry, they were known as Vaishyas. Servants and workers, they were come to be known as Shudras. Clear? The class was not very sharp, liberal society, and based on the principle of equality. And one thing more, children, you need to be sure about, here the principle of equality was followed, that everyone is equal in the eyes of God. They think that, they thought the Aryans had that kind of a thinking ki everyone was equal, right? So in this caste, if you see the Aryans, early Vedic Aryans, basically they didn't believe in caste system. They didn't believe strictly in the four orders of society. Everyone was equal and everyone can go and meet with each other. Clear, everyone? So they were quite liberal. They were quite open to these orders. Clear? They were not strictly following this kind of order. They simply followed that priest cannot meet with the common man and all. This they were not following, right? They were quite liberal and they had some, they were quite open towards all these things. Clear? Let's come on to next slide. Now, this civilization was the non-iron using phase. As you people know, this civilization was totally dependent on agriculture. So basically, if you see, this civilization has not produced the Aryans. In fact, maybe iron was produced at that time, but early Vedic Aryans didn't know the use of iron so far. Right, so what happened? Now, archaeological evidence suggests that the grey ware culture of Punjab, Haryana extended to regions such as Bhagwanpura in Kurukshetra, Daderi in Ludhiana, and Katpalan and Nagar in Jalandhar. Right, so in place of iron, what they have produced, what they saw, this historians, they saw the grey ware culture of Punjab, where they had the grey ware. They basically trade in wares, right? And basically all these ware culture was found in all over Punjab, Haryana, Bhagwanpura, right? That means they didn't know the iron, right? Next, now economy was chiefly agrarian and pastoral. Cattle farming was done. Pastoral means cattle farming was done by early Vedic Aryans, right? Cattle formed the chief source of their wealth, and obviously whoever was wealthy, they have more and more cattle, right? Next, the copper and bronze were available in plenty and iron was not known. Might be possible iron was known, but copper and bronze was available in plenty. And if you remember, in Harappan civilization also, iron was not known to them. They were simply dealing in copper and bronze, and that was called Copper and Bronze Age, right? The civilization has been existed in Copper and Bronze Age. Clear? And later on, when early Vedic Iron started coming, to Iron Age started with the starting of the early Vedic Aryans. Clear? Come on to next slide now. So though we have come to an end of this, of this civilization, early Vedic civilization, I hope so people have understood what was civilization for, what this civilization tried to tell us, right? So again, we are moving back to this chapter. Again, I give the revision. right? See, what we have started with early Vedic civilization, and if you compare with early Vedic civilization with Harappa, obviously they were not in competition. Clear? They were quite simple. Harappa was an all-round developed civilization. They were skilled workers. Harappans, they were skilled in making towns, right? In drainage system, in house and everything. They were quite skilled and they were quite knowledgeable people. Clear? Their underground system, they have great bath and everything. Clear? And plus, they have the crafts. They were good in crafts, right? They have many seals were found. Many seals refer to physical features, ornaments and dress we come to know from the seal, and seal was a main source of knowledge, main source of information in Harappan civilization. Now come to early Vedic civilization. So in early Vedic civilization, it has been existed. So how come to we know that this civilization has been existed so far? What was from which source? Was from Rig Veda. So in this civilization we come to know which Veda has been developed so far was Rig Veda, the world oldest known Veda. Veda means literature, right, everyone? So this Veda tells us about many information regarding early Vedic Aryans and many things related to later Vedic Aryans, right? So in this chapter, what I have given you about just their settlement and their features. Clear? So again, I give you the revision. So we have started was what we have started with again. So we have started with early Aryan settlement. So here most historians, their view was what they have simply migrated from Central Asia, different parts of Asia and Europe. Then in India where they have migrated in Sapta Sindhu region, right? Sapta Sindhu comprises of Punjab, Chenab, Ravi, Bias, Satluj, River Indus, River Saraswati. Now this region believed to be the first permanent home of the Aryans. You simply memorize that this was the first permanent home of the Aryans, right? Now here the Rig hymns was composed in the form of Rig Veda. Clear? Now next, sources to reconstruct the early Vedic civilization. So if you could remember, the sources was what? So before coming to the sources, we have to clear ourselves ki literature. Now this Vedic literature was being divided into early and later Vedic literature. So in early literature we are getting what? Rig Vedic, and from Rig Veda we come to know different sources and different information regarding early Vedic age and later Vedic literature, which I'll be telling you in the next video. Okay, in the upcoming videos actually. Now the Rig Veda, the first of the Vedas, probably the earliest literary work. Then it contained what was Rig Veda? It contained hymns in praise of gods and goddesses, right? And which gods they worship? Basically they were the nature worshipper, where they worshipped Indra, Varuna and Agni. Not like Harappa, they worshipped actually the cobras, the snakes, the crocodiles, and plus they worshipped the mother goddess also. That was a terracotta figurine if you remember. And then they worshipped Shiva Pashupati seal also. I mean many gods and goddesses including animals they worshipped. But here if you see in early Vedic age, they were only the worshippers of nature. They worshipped nature, right? Next, it consists of 1028 hymns divided into 10 mandalas or books. Clear? And it pertain now the which period actually it has been. This Veda has covered which period actually? The early Vedic age. They are the period from 1500 BC to 1000 BC. Now Rig Vedic hymns. Now what Vedic hymns tells us? Basically this hymns tells us about god Indra, then Agni, right? Then this hymns tells us about the cows and the bulls, and whosoever had cows, they were considered themselves as the wealthiest people, right? So if you see, this civilization was very simple civilization, only dependent on agriculture, not like Harappa, right? They were depending on, they have a very good craft system. They were they have the seals, maybe seals where they were good in pottery, they were good in metallurgy. Many things we have read in Harappan civilization, what they were dealing in metals, they were dealing in ornaments, right? Come on to next slide now. Now Rig Vedic hymns. Now Rig Vedic hymns also tells us about four orders of the society, right? Like the Brahmins, then the common man engaged in agriculture, trade, industry, Vaishyas, then servants and workers known as Shudras, right? And basically their occupations determine their four orders, right? Their occupations, what they were dealing at, where they are working, right? If someone was priest, definitely he belongs to the Brahmin category, right? Then if someone was a warrior, so he was considered as Kshatriyas. Okay. Now come on to the class was not very sharp. That means they were not dealing into class system. Class system means Brahmins, they were not interact with the lower class. Lower class didn't interact with the upper class. It's not like that. The class division was not very sharp and strict. Everyone can interact with anyone. Clear? And liberal society means freedom is being given in this society, right? And basically they simply value the principle of equality. Everyone is equal, right? Now non-iron using phase in Vedic history, the civilization was the non-iron using phase, right? Here the iron was not known actually, and this civilization basically known what this comes under the copper and a bronze age. And coppers in the bronze age also we did in Harappan also, and Harappans also didn't know the use of iron. Basically they were coming under the copper and the bronze age, right? And archaeological evidence suggests that the grey ware, actually basically they were dealing in grey wares, right? And the culture, this sort of culture has been, so is spreaded all over in Punjab, Haryana, and which was extended to regions such as Bhagwanpura and Kurukshetra, Daderi in Ludhiana, Katpalan in Nagar. Then economy basically was chiefly agrarian and pastoral. Pastoral means cattle was reared, right? Cattle, bulls and all, right? Next, then cattle formed the chief source of their wealth. Then the copper and bronze were available in plenty. Clear everyone? So iron was not known. So I hope so children, you people have understood so far ki what was early Vedic civilization. So listen to the videos carefully, and do, if you want to do the revision again, listen to the Harappan civilization again, right? The our constitution fundamental, right? Do keep on revising. Clear? And listen to this video as well, and upcoming videos also I'll tell lot many things related to early Vedic civilization, later Vedic civilization, right? Okay, till then, thank you.